Hey everybody, my voice just cracked there for some reason. Welcome back to Nikki T Live. I'm your host Nick Taylor, and today I'm hanging with Fabian Hiller. Fabian, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. For folks who might not know who you are, because the development world can be small niches sometimes. So for folks that might not know you, would you mind saying a little bit about yourself, or maybe what you're up to these days? And yeah, and then we'll just go from there.
Yeah, so I'm probably mainly a student. I'm still in college. Um, I'm originally from Germany, but I do a master's degree in computer science at Pace University, New York.
Oh, okay.
And beside that, I mainly do open source and try to have a good impact on the community in the long run.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I think I first came across you from my old coworker from Netlify, Ryan Carniato, who's the creator of Solid. I think I was on a live stream with somebody else, and I don't know. Valibot somehow came on my radar, which is one of the projects you've been working on, which we're going to talk about today. But yeah, I'm curious for like I work in open source professionally, and uh, I've always I don't know. I started contributing to open source in late 2014, I think. It was very intimidating initially because, I didn't even know Git at the time. I was coming from different source controls. I was working in a Microsoft shop, so they had something called Team Foundation Server, and I'd used SVN before that. Oh, thanks for the follow, Crutchcorn. Nice to see you here, and congrats again on the book. Um, yeah, I don't know. I just kind of fell in love with, I don't know if love's the proper term, but just really interested in open source and like just putting yourself out there. And clearly that's what you're doing as well. And I'm curious how you got into open source. Was it through university or was it something completely different? I'm guessing by your smile it's not university, maybe.
um, yeah, so my way was a little bit different from probably most people.
Okay.
I started my first company while high school, and I basically did freelancing for about 2 years, so or 2 to 3 years. So I built websites, I did video production, graphic design, marketing,
Okay.
kind of everything. And about 2 years later, I started a tech startup.
Okay.
And in this process, I kind of learned JavaScript, React, Firebase, and a lot of more things. And um, this was basically my entry into software development.
Okay.
And I kind of found my passion in this process.
Okay.
And of course, back then I worked with open source tools, for example, React, but
Yeah.
I wasn't able to really contribute. I tried it once with Storybook for people who knows
Okay.
it,
Yeah.
and created my first PR. Um, I think it was not merged back then. My code was
Okay.
probably too dirty, but that's fine. But I appreciate back then the one of the core members like also they made a call with me, explained everything, and yeah, it was really nice that they took time for it.
Okay.
And from there on, probably 1 or 2 years later, I then started to go to college. So I had like a lot of work experience before that,
Okay.
and I back then I already had a dream to start an open source project. I already had ideas, and I actually created a cool open source project that never went open source. Um, and my first real project that became open source was modular
Okay.
forms, and that's
Okay.
basically a form library back then I initially developed it for Solid.js.
Okay.
That's also how I met Ryan and the other folks from Solid.
Okay.
And after that, I also developed the same library for Quick. That's how I met Misco.
Okay.
And that was basically how I got at the end into open source. And um, the funny thing is that Ryan and Misco became the supervisors of my bachelor thesis.
Oh, no way. That's awesome.
And Valibot was part of my bachelor thesis. So we can have a look at my thesis because it's public.
Yeah.
Um, but that's basically the story how I got into open source, how I got in contact with all the other contributors or open source community
Oh, okay.
members. And yeah, that's also, yeah. So we announced Valibot in August 2023.
Yeah.
And also with a blog post on Builder.io, and through the power of this network, of the network of Builder and Ryan and Misco, a lot of other people shared it. So, for example, the CEO of Rosell,
Okay.
and I think also the CEO of Netlify, and a lot more people. And that's how the project got its initial push.
Okay.
And in like less than a couple of weeks, it was integrated in TRCP, React Hook Forms, Hono, and a lot of other projects. And um, yeah, and from there on, it starts to grow.
Yeah.
And I was already kind of surprised by the attention and the numbers and everything. But from there on, it went like whoot. And especially this week, it's growing again really, really well, and yeah, it's great to see.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, we're gonna talk about there was a new release. Before we dig into all things Valibot and some other stuff, there's just some comments in the chat. So Crutchcorn, who I'm not sure if you know, Corbin
Yes,
Crutchley, yeah, he says,
I'm in contact with him.
okay, yeah, he says modular forms was your first, and he's like, what? So he's pretty impressed that that was your first project, and
Yeah.
yeah, and then oh, hey, Idrinth as well in the chat, and Charles, thanks all for joining. Um, yeah, so um, we can. I'll just switch us over to pairing view here. I'm just gonna bring us to. You should be able to see this, but I'm on the Valibot. Why am I having trouble saying that? I'm on the Valibot homepage here, and for folks, like I know probably the people in the chat are probably familiar with Valibot or kind of know what it is, but for folks who might be checking out the live stream recording later that might not be aware of the project, can you kind of give just kind of a short description of what Valibot is and why you would want to use it?
In simple terms, Valibot is a schema validation library that basically means you can define a data set,
Okay.
similar to how you define your data with TypeScript. So you say you have an object and the object has a key, and the key, for example, is email, and so on. And then you can use this information or this object that you create
Okay.
to validate data. And it's especially useful, for example, with forms or with the incoming data on servers.
Okay.
And the advantage of a schema is that, especially combined with TypeScript, that you have one source of truth. So the schema holds the type information and the validation information.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you understand it really easy when you compare it how you would write it without a schema. So without a schema, we would use if-else conditions to check if something is an object or is a string and so on.
Yeah.
And this works for like pretty simple data like a string or a number. But as soon as you validate complex data, you have like loops and nested logic, and then it gets
Okay.
pretty quickly very complicated. And with TypeScript, you also pretty quickly lose the automatic type inference, and that's kind of where a schema come into place to improve the developer experience.
Okay. Yeah, and this is like you were saying, this can be used on the server, but it's client side and server side validation, which is kind of nice
Yeah,
because I think a lot of folks in the front end space, like they probably understand to validate, but I think a lot of times, maybe not a lot of times, I'm generalizing there, but I think sometimes people still forget to validate server side, and that's where it's most important. Like it's nice.
yeah,
I mean, I know you're laughing, but I've seen it happen. So
yeah,
it's it's definitely nice on the client side, because it adds a better experience. Not having to do a round trip or just fail a submission, you can stop it right away on the client side. But I think that's what's powerful about this, because you can you can kind of use it in both worlds, which is kind of nice, because like I think before something like this and something like Zod, which we'll talk about because I know we were talking about this briefly before, um, you know people kind of had separate ways to validate things on the server side and client side, and also it depends if you're full stack JavaScript, I guess, too, so there's that as well. But
yeah. Yeah, so you can say that there are different use cases in different areas where you can use it, but
yeah.
you kind of get the entire power of Valibot if you use it with a full stack framework where you
Yeah.
can share your schemas between kind of the front and the back end.
Hmm.
And especially for form validation, this can get really powerful as it simplifies your entire code. You have at the end one schema, and that's the source of truth for your types and for your
Okay.
validation logic. And you can use it in the front end to provide a great UX. And you
Hmm.
can also use it in the back end to secure the incoming data so you don't process any invalid data and, for example, put it in your database.
Yeah. And Crutchcorn in the chat saying, did somebody say isomorphic validation? And also welcome violated sign. And there was I don't know if you know Jlarky on Twitter. I'm not sure if he's trolling you or not in a playful way, but he says, I'm not interested in how you got the number 1 kilobyte. I'm getting 9 KB in bundled JS. So I'm not sure if he's
Yeah.
trolling you or not.
No, no. What he's saying is a good point. So
Okay.
he basically says that Valibot is not 1 kilobyte; it's 9 kilobyte,
Yeah.
and that's kind of false and true.
Uh-huh.
So it's right that the entire package is 9 kilobytes, but
Okay. Yeah.
the benefit of Valibot is that you can completely tree-shake its API. That means when you build your application, your bundler use the static imports to
Mm-hmm.
identify what functionality are you actually using. And when the bundler identifies that you, for example, only use, as in this example, the object, string, email, and some more APIs, then it removes everything else. And that's how, for example, this example that you currently see in the stream ends up at around 1.5, 1.2 kilobyte.
Okay.
And in the stream, we can also have a look at that and can kind of prove that this really works.
Okay. Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, no, I know Jay Larky's always digging into things. Yeah, and he's
Yeah.
saying if you do import the named exports, import parse object and string, it comes to 900 bytes. So I guess that's kind of like the 1 KB. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
for
so
sure.
it basically depends on how much you use. Of course, if you use the entire functionality, but that's very unlikely, then you end
Yeah.
up at 9 kilobytes. But in most cases, you, in most cases, I would say, even if you have like a crazy complex schema, you
Hmm.
usually not use more than 2 kilobyte of our source code.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, and Crutchcorn saying, and even then, 9 kilobytes is pretty good compared to alternatives, which is true.
Yeah.
Like, um, yeah. And speaking of alternatives, so we talked about this briefly before. So I'm not sure how long Valibot's been around, but I know you were mentioning your friends or acquaintances with Colin who works on Zod, and so I guess did you look at Zod one day and you said I could make this better, or like, or was it were you interested in contributing to Zod and it just that wasn't the path that Colin wanted to do, or how did things come about? I guess.
Um, so I already used SOT when it was probably in V1 or maybe even V0. I'm not sure. So I was a pretty early adopter of SOT. That's how I remember it. I could be wrong. Maybe I just kind of joined 1 year later, but um, yeah, it's already many years ago. And
Okay.
back then it was like magic. So I searched for, so back then I started, of course, to validate stuff with if else. And because also I did it for the startup and the code there was like crazy complex. So I think in
Okay.
total I wrote more than like 100,000 lines of code. And the
Okay.
startup like handled payments and invoicing, taxes, everything. It was a pretty complex software, kind of a complete online shop.
Okay.
And I was in the process of rewriting that, and I searched for better solutions compared to my if else logic. And I think back then I found stuff like Yup and Joy.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Oops.
I remember those. Yeah, I used
And
Formic a while ago, like a few years ago, and I think Formic uses Joy or Yup. I can't remember which one.
yeah, I think Yup. Not totally sure, but I think this one. And back then I also started to adopting TypeScript. And that's kind of how I then found SOT. Because SOT
Okay.
was, in my understanding, the first or one of the first libraries in this space that took TypeScript fully into account.
Mm-hmm.
And it was back then, for me, it was kind of magic. I could like define my data set with a really easy and simple API and got the typed data back and when it was valid.
Mm-hmm.
And the magic here is without something like SOT, you of course use typecasting or other solutions to make it at the end type safe. But this
Yeah.
is really error prone because you really quickly forgot something if you expand your data or changes things.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of how I started to use SOT. And as I said, I was pretty happy, and I'm still pretty happy. The X of SOT
Yeah.
is really great. Um,
Yeah.
but I was always very interested and focused on performance and bundle size and optimization. So um, I kind of I'm not sure. I don't have the right words, but um,
Oh, it's okay.
I try to make things as good as possible with as less resources as
Okay. Yeah.
possible. And that's one example why I looked back then into solid shares and other solutions and moved from React.
Yeah.
And I also moved to Solid back then because I saw the opportunity to innovate in this space. Because in React,
Mm-hmm.
there were already a lot of solutions.
Yeah.
And I, of course, worked a lot with forms back then. And that's kind of how I got into modular forms. And as the name tells, modular forms is kind of a modular form library. So the idea of modularity and a modular architecture and tree shaking and for modular forms also code splitting
Mm-hmm.
was already back then in my mind.
Okay.
And um, I initially wrote modular forms with its own validation system.
Okay.
And that's a little bit similar to Valibot because of the bundle size concerns. But
Mm-hmm.
of course, a lot of people also wanted to use modular forms with SOT. That's
Mm-hmm.
how I kind of integrated SOT into modular forms, but
Okay.
afterwards. And then with the move to Quick, okay, no, that was not right what I was saying, but yeah, that's basically my story and how I get to know SOT and
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. No, that's cool.
how I think about that.
Yeah, no,
And
that's cool.
what's
No,
what's
sorry, go ahead.
maybe funny, so I worked on modular forms for a long time, and when I started my bachelor, so the funny thing is, I initially planned to write my bachelor thesis about a complete different topic. My plan was to
Okay.
write it in the area of education because I also have my own online courses in Germany where I teach HTML, CSS, Tailwind, and other things.
Okay.
And um, I have planned to write my thesis in this area and tried to improve this space in Germany with new ideas.
Okay.
But it turned out differently at the end. And then I reached out to Ryan and to Misko, and they agreed to supervise my work. And
Okay.
then I pitched them different ideas I had in mind. So it wasn't clear to work on Walibot.
Okay.
And at the end, it was kind of random that I ended up developing Walibot.
Okay.
And that's even funnier. So I still, back then, when I worked on modular forms, I already had the idea of trying to write a modular SOT.
Okay.
Um, but of course, it's work and it takes time, and I never get along to work on it. And through my thesis, I kind of had 3 months where I could dedicated focus on this part, and that's
Okay.
kind of how, yeah, it turned out at the end.
No, that's cool. That's a great story. And uh, uh, Crutchcorn is saying, well, he'll be right back. Works. He's got something for work. He'll be right back. But he was. I think he's just playing with you. But he's saying, why didn't you join Tan Stack form instead of modular forms? But I again,
Yeah.
he's just playing around. But
Yeah, I'm still like looking forward to also chat with him because
yeah.
I still have also I have the idea to also rewrite modular forms and make it a lot better.
Okay.
And I think he's a great sparring partner. And
Yeah.
yeah. But maybe he
Yeah.
can convince me to put my work into Dance Stack. Let's see.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I
Yeah.
haven't. I haven't done a live stream with Crutchcorn yet. I think we'll get around to it at some point. But yeah, he's super knowledgeable in the framework space, and he's the name of his book is escaping me at the moment. But and I know there's like more another book coming out at some point in the next year. But yeah, Crutchcord saying. So you're saying there's a chance? So he's looking forward to your PRs in Tan Stack form. It sounds like. Oh yeah, that's it. The framework field guide. Yeah, yeah. So check that out too. Yeah. So okay. So we kind of know a bit of history there, and I guess getting back to my point, like, is there any reason why you were like? I know you said there was work in it. I guess because this was you ended up doing it during your thesis and stuff, but like there was did you ever discuss with Colin about like making Zod more modular and like it might have been breaking changes and stuff, but like just improving Zod versus doing Valibot or
I reached out to him, but I'm not totally sure, but I think the time I reached out to him was already the time I decided to do Valibot and write my thesis about this topic.
Okay,
Um,
gotcha.
and we, I think we exchanged a few messages, but I
Okay.
think back then he was completely focused on Ban and
Mm.
also did not work too much on SOT.
Okay.
And probably that's the reason why we though didn't like continued the chat
Okay.
and yeah. Um, but so of course there are options to possibilities to improve SOT, and I think he is already working on that for SOT 4.
Okay.
Um, but I think for SOT it does not make sense to make it that extremely modular as Valibot is doing, because
Okay.
most SOT users or a lot of SOT users love SOT for its API, and
Okay.
this would be probably a too big breaking change. I know there are options to achieve the same modularity with with a chaining API, but when you do this without a compiler, you usually end up with the drawbacks of both solutions.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, yeah, it's there's yeah, that's why it's probably makes sense to work on a completely new project. And
Okay.
I know that sometimes people saying, why don't you put your work into an existing project? Um, but I kind of do that. So of course I work in
Mm.
Volleyball, building
Yeah.
up my own project, but I'm still in exchange with Colin and also with other open source maintainer, and we exchange ideas. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, and I'm sure, improvements that I made in Valibot will affect and hopefully improve other libraries, and other libraries will hopefully affect and improve Valibot. And I hope at the end we end up at great open source projects, and the community can choose what they prefer and what they want to
Yeah.
use.
Yeah, no, no, that's great. No, thanks for the explanation. And it's it's kind of akin to like a lot of the frameworks working together. Like, I think people used to think that like frameworks are against each other, but like I know, like it's really not. At least I'd say in general, it's definitely not the case. Like like I know like the solid JS folks, I mean Ryan specifically, but there's tons of people on the team, they're constantly trying to help other frameworks and also like a lot of these frameworks are leveraging Vite, and so like stuff that they've done in the Vite ecosystem to make their framework better, they've contributed
Yeah,
back to Vite, which basically helps everybody else out. Like I know my coworker Brandon Roberts, who built Analog JS, the meta framework for Angular. Once I can't remember if it was the Solid JS team that landed server side rendering in Vite to make it a lot easier. But once that was unlocked, basically Brandon was able to leverage that to bring server side rendering to his meta framework. So just cool in general. It's nice to see people in open source just helping each other out. I know. I think that's the
yeah.
way it should be. You
So
know.
I think most people in open source do the hard work that's necessary because they have passion for it,
Mm-hmm.
and they have the motivation to improve something. And of course, you try the best to make your solution win, but at the end, there's no, I'm not sure if that's the right wording because I'm not a native speaker, but there's no like bad blood with other open
Yeah.
source maintainers that working on similar solutions, and I'm more interested in talking to them to make my solution better, or to maybe find out that my solution does not make sense and I should work on something
Yeah.
else. And I think there
Yeah.
is no need to like be in a fight. It's more
No, no,
like a
totally.
friendly competition, and I think that's also what drives or strives our community in general and what makes us all better. So
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't think anybody's trying to act in bad faith. They just want to make the ecosystem better. And I'm saying in general because maybe there are some bad actors, but most of the people, because like I've interacted with a lot of people in the open source community from working at when I used to work at like Dev 2, but even Netlify was, you know, in in talks with people on frameworks all the time and stuff, and everybody was just had lots of great ideas, and we're just trying to make them better. And it's always nice to hear like somebody benefited from somebody else's idea or back and forth, and so it's just nice to see, because every now and then sometimes the internet can be a bad place, but it's nice to hear like stories like this. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I think there are still a lot of open source maintainers and contributors who just do it for fun and for passion and don't, for
Hmm.
example, have any financial expectations from that.
Yeah.
And that's why I think for these kind of peoples, there is no reason to have like dirty fights with other open
Yeah.
source members.
Yeah. At the same time, it is definitely nice if you get sponsored for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay. Well.
think yeah, that this topic is also interesting because um, I thought and I still will try to fund my open source work on my own,
Hmm.
but Valibot is kind of beside my studies a complete full-time job. So I'm
Okay.
sure over this year I spent every week like 50 to 60 hours into
Oh,
Valibot.
okay.
It's not like calculated, so I could be wrong. It could be a lot more, it could be a little less, but it's probably more than a full-time job. And especially while you actively developing something, write documentation and
Hmm.
do stuff like that, it's hard to do stuff on the side that basically can finance it.
Yeah.
And that's why, so at the beginning, I was not looking for any sponsors and partners. It kind of
Okay.
happened by its own. But this kind of changed because I saw that it is a lot of work. And at the end, someone have to pay the bill.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
how it
True.
is. And if I can convince more partners and sponsors, I can put more effort and
Yeah.
more time into the project. And on the long run, I have the vision to build an organization around it and
Okay.
to be able to pay people full time to maintain and also continue the research and development for these kind of products. And yeah, I hope it will work out in the long run. So if
Yeah.
any companies are interested in this, feel free to reach out.
Yeah. Definitely. I know there's a lot of companies that specifically have budget for sponsoring open source projects. Like I know Sentry, the observability platform, they
I
do
think
that.
actually they use Valibot. I think I saw it on
Oh,
one
no
of their
way.
open source projects. I'm not totally sure. I could be wrong, but I think I saw it
Oh, okay.
because on GitHub you can see like repositories that use your package and
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, who knows? You could maybe hit them up. I know some people over there if you want me to put you in contact, but I know I can't remember the amount. But they announce, I think they do it every year. They just say like we have X amount of dollars that we're putting into open source because Sentry started as an open source project. There's still an open source component to it, but yeah, it'd be interesting to maybe chat with them. But I was gonna mention because like we were supposed to live stream. I think maybe it might have been 2 months ago or a month and a bit. And I remember when we initially talked, you were like, "I'm working on a new version of Valibot. The API is changing and stuff. So I know. Then you dropped me a message. I think it was a few weeks ago, and you said like, okay, it's done. And so I've popped on the screen the blog post for version 0.31.0 that it looks like it got released on June 6th. Do you want to maybe speak to like I guess what the changes were, or like we'll definitely look at some code and stuff, and like if it's too much to talk about changes, like we can just talk more high level about what was done, I guess. But
I think to have a look into Valibot, it could make sense to open the playground and maybe just create like simple
oh,
schemas and see how everything is working. And
okay,
then we can also talk about the changes we did over the last
okay,
months. So maybe a little bit about the history. Um,
okay,
at the beginning of this year, I thought Valibot is on a really good path, and I
mm-hmm,
will probably release V1 soon. And then some community members came up with interesting ideas on how to improve Valibot.
okay,
And they kind of tackled some pain points I had in my head.
okay,
And but since it was API change and not like a small one,
mm-hmm,
I wasn't sure if I should go this path. But
okay,
in the end, I knew if it will turn out better, I should do it, because if I don't do it, someone else will do it at some point. And
okay, yeah,
then basically it's over for Valibot. And I think with the current version, Valibot is now on a really, really good path. And I don't expect like crazy big API changes until we reach V1.
okay,
And with the current source code and code base, I also have a really good feeling for
okay,
the library in general. I think we are now in a really good way, and hopefully reach V1 soon. And I hope that this gives the right signal to other open source maintainers as well as companies,
okay,
to include it in their projects. And yeah.
yeah, yeah. I know.
Um,
I haven't used Valibot myself. I've used Zodabit because like I have Astro like in their content collections and stuff. But but I do I don't remember if you tweeted it out or if I just saw it somewhere. But I definitely know that dot pipe is new. Uh,
yes, that's kind of the biggest change.
okay.
And there are also I did not decide it like in a day if I want to do this. I created
Okay.
a whole discussion and um, asked the community and discussed with the community. And yeah, we can have a look at like the improvements and why at the end I decided to go this way.
Yeah.
But maybe let's start with writing a schema. So maybe
Okay.
remove everything until line 3. So we
Okay.
start
Perfect.
with writing a new schema.
Yeah.
So let's maybe create a simple schema like user schema, something like that, or profile schema. I think
Okay.
that's easy to get for everyone. And
Yeah.
I personally prefer to write schemas with a capitalized letter.
Okay.
If you are interested why, we can also talk about that later, but if you're interested, you can maybe open the guides in another tab,
Okay. Cool.
and under advanced, when you scroll down, there is a whole guide explaining the naming
Okay.
conventions and why it
Okay.
could make sense to follow them. So if you're curious, feel free to have a look.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. No. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
We can also talk about it later, or maybe people who are watching this live stream or video just have now a reference, because people sometimes ask
Yeah.
why
No.
I do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. No. I'll definitely give a
Okay,
read through, or we'll touch on it. Okay. So
yeah.
we're gonna
So
create a new schema.
yeah, so now we create a new schema. It's a profile schema, and it's probably an object, so you can start typing v.object. And what's cool with the wildcard import, as you just saw, that we get auto-completion.
Mm-hmm.
And the naming that Valibot's APIs are following, they are kind of close to JavaScript and TypeScript and also to SOT.
Okay.
So it's probably really easy to get started and write your
Yeah.
schemas this way. Yeah. So now we created an object schema, and now we have to define its entries.
Okay.
And its entries are basically an object with keys and
Okay.
with a schema as the value. So for example, we could write now name,
Okay.
and then name is probably a string, so v.string.
Okay.
And let's do age, so we have a different data type.
Okay. Yeah, and this is like you were saying, getting back to it's leveraging the JavaScript primitive, so it's pretty clear what things are here.
Yeah. And maybe let's stop. We can continue, expand the schema later. Let's
Okay.
maybe have a look at what you can do now.
Okay.
So there are basically two things the schema can now provide you. The first thing is the types. So instead of writing a TypeScript type definition and
Mm-hmm.
your validation logic, you kind of combine that automatically by creating a schema. So,
Okay.
for example, what we could do now, we could create a function
Okay.
that has the name create user, something like that, or create profile.
Okay. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
profile since it's
maybe
profile scheme.
create profile. That's good. So it matches. And what we can do now is we can return v.parse, and then we put in the schema as the first argument.
Okay.
And our function has one argument that's, for example, data, and it's
Okay.
unknown. So you, for example, could use this function on your server to put in unknown data that you derived from your client. And
Okay.
this function kind of returns the typed data of a user if everything is valid. So now you
Okay.
put the data as the second argument to parse.
Okay.
And what this code is now basically doing, it's using the schema you just created. And based on this schema, it's parsing the unknown data. And if
Okay.
the unknown data matches the schema, then they get return typed. And if not, an error
Okay.
is thrown. So what
Okay.
we can do now is we can create a user and create a profile. So for example, const profile, and then create a profile.
Okay.
And
And
let's
this is
start with
data.
valid data, and then we can have a look at invalid data.
Okay. I won't put my real age, so we'll just say I am currently 18.
Probably
That's
pretty
legal
close.
where I live. Yeah. Okay.
So, is it possible that we have to see because our cameras may block the debugger on the right? Maybe you have to
Oh,
move your
okay.
browser window a little bit to the left.
Okay, yeah.
That's probably
Okay,
the
let's see.
simplest solution.
Yeah, okay. We
Yeah,
can
and
do.
can you click the share button in the playground?
Yeah.
Then it saves your, yeah, now your your code is saved and now you can reload. So
Okay. Gotcha.
it
Understood.
adapts to the new screen. Yeah, you have to reload a window because I don't know why actually. So
Okay.
now
Okay, it's in the
it's
query string,
yeah.
kind of like the TypeScript playground now. Okay.
Yeah, the thing is, also we have in an embedded VS Code editor, and this is not fully responsive if you change the window size.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Okay, now we basically created a schema and we create a function to parse our schema, and we created a new profile with some sample data, and now you can execute your code with the play button
Okay.
on the top right.
Okay. And while that's just running, let's see what
Yeah, so
else.
you see nothing because it's valid, so we should lock our profile.
Okay, so I could do console.log or
Yeah, console.log, and then
yeah,
just put in the profile.
yeah. Okay.
And if you execute it now, we
Okay, yeah.
see our profile on the right. And what's
Okay.
also interesting, if you hover the profile, you can see that it's typed.
Okay, so
So
it
you, for
infers the
example,
types.
you're now able to write profile dot, and then you get the TypeScript auto completion.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's really great. And to your to your question about the Pascal casing for here, I think I know why. It's not a TypeScript type, but we're treating it kind of like a type in JavaScript land. Is that why? Just to differentiate from actual
Yes.
variables?
Um,
Okay.
so what we could do now, when you scroll a little bit to the top below the schema,
Yeah. Yeah.
create add a new line and type in type,
Yeah.
and then call it profile schema. Profile schema, for example,
Yeah.
and then equal v dot infer output
Oh, okay.
with uppercase I.
For output. Yeah.
And then you can pass. No, you have to pass it as a generic.
Okay.
It's a type. It's a type, not a function. And so you
Oh, yeah,
also
yeah.
don't call it. It's just a TypeScript type. And now
Oh, yeah, yeah.
you
Sorry.
pass. Now you pass in type of profile schema.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Okay.
and now you have as you now you have a type and schema with the same name, and you can, if this would be now a bigger project, you could also export both under the same name. And
Oh,
this
okay.
way
I
you
see.
only have one import, and you can, and TypeScript automatically knows when you want to use something as a type or as the actual schema.
Ah, interesting.
So that's one idea. And as you said, we usually treat the schema more as a like a type, or and kind of that's the reason why it could make sense to follow this name convention. And
Yeah.
but at the end you are free what you want to do, so you can still name it differently and do whatever you like or what fits best your code base.
Yeah. I
But this
think
is
this makes
something
sense
that,
to me though.
yeah, that's something that turned out to be a good developer experience in the end. Yeah,
Okay.
and so now you saw how we can parse something, and we also saw how we can infer its type. And what we can have a look next is what happens if the data is invalid. So, for example, you could pass the string 18 instead of the number, and then
Yeah.
we have a look what's wrong here.
Okay. So I guess before we do that, because the type passed in is unknown, that's why it's not like TypeScript's not complaining at this point, right?
Exactly, because we
Yeah.
um, it's unknown, so it can be anything, and we also put in unknown data into the schema. That's kind of how it knows
Yeah.
works.
Okay.
That's why we don't get a complaint. So in the real world, you don't type name, nick, and age 18. You pass in the data you receive from your client, and that's
Yeah.
unknown. And that's why this pattern makes sense. Of course, if you type it yourself, then you probably don't use unknown. You could, for
Yeah.
example, add the profile schema type, and then you get an arrow as you know it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now you can execute it again. And if the
Okay.
playground works, we can see an arrow.
Yeah. So invalid type as expected. So yeah, and yeah, just to make it super clear, this isn't a TypeScript error. This is actually a runtime error because it's actually executing the code.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what's cool, also what I think is cool, how powerful are the arrow messages from Valibot.
Yeah.
So
Here.
what you can see now, it says your invalid type.
Yeah.
And if you scroll a little bit to the right, we can see that it expected a number, but we derived the string 18.
Yeah.
So you kind of have now every information you need to fix your problem
Yeah.
out
And
of the
it's
box without writing your own error messages or anything else.
Yeah, and this is nice too because it's very explicit because like even though I'm very comfortable in TypeScript, sometimes when you get type errors, so not at runtime, but just like, it'll say like this type does not is not equivalent to this other type, and then you get this depending on how complex the type is, it can be just very hard to grok even if you know what you're doing. So this is kind of nice that it's very clear. It expected this, but this is what it got.
What we could also do now to see all the details, we could wrap our create profile code in a try catch.
Okay. It's unknown. No, that's by default. It's unknown, I think.
You can also do it as any,
Okay.
doesn't matter for
Oh
our
yeah.
example.
Yeah.
It's probably
Okay. So we have.
easier. So yeah, what I'm interested in is add a console error statement in the catch block,
Oh.
and then access e.issues, and then
Okay.
in this case you can access the first issue with the index 0. Maybe
Okay.
type the ESN here so that we don't get any type errors for
Yeah.
now. It's only
Okay.
for like showcasing. And you can clear our logs on the right. And now you can execute it again. And
Okay.
now we see kind of the full power of Valibot and its validation system.
Okay.
So maybe we start at the top. And I want to say that this kind of information that you get back, it's uniformed. It's uniformed across every schema function and any validation action. So you
Okay.
can kind of trust how our validation system works, and you can use it to craft your own error messages or
Okay.
to process this data and, for example, include Valibot in your own form library and so on. And yeah,
Okay.
what's cool, we can see that the issue kind is a schema.
Mm-hmm.
A schema means basically that it's a type error. Schemas are there to validate specific data types. Then we also can see what type it is. So the issue type in this case is number because we validated it with the number schema. And can you scroll a little bit to the top?
Oh yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. And then you see the raw input in it's kind of line 3 of our, no, a little
Yeah.
bit
Yeah. Here.
above. Yeah, this one. So you see the raw input. And then we have two properties expected and derived. And the magic behind these properties are that these properties are always strings language neutral in a language neutral language. These are
Yeah.
language neutral strings, so they
Yeah.
don't use any language specific words. Instead,
Okay.
for example, we will see it later for like greater and smaller, they use like kind of symbols that are similar to TypeScript and the JavaScript programming language. And you can
Okay.
use them to create custom error messages that are language specific. But
Oh, okay.
yeah, so there are, so I think that's also maybe important to mention. I did not created Valibot like in a week or two. I wrote like a whole thesis and I work now on Valibot kind of full time for about a year. And in any decision are many thoughts, and there's usually a reason.
Hmm.
And that's also what I want that our users can expect.
Okay.
And yeah, yeah. Beside that, we have of course the error message. And what's also cool, you have the path. Yeah, the
Okay.
error
Yeah.
message is basically what we already saw, and then we have the path that basically links to the nested um, schema,
Okay.
and that's also how form libraries can know where at which field did the error occur, so they can show
Okay.
it at the right position.
Yeah. No, this is definitely a lot of very useful information to grok on. Um,
And the
you're
challenge, yeah,
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. No,
no,
go ahead.
go on. No, it's
I was
alright.
gonna
It was not
say
too important.
that. Yeah. So you're having us console error e dot issues 0, but I see uh, issues here is undefined, but that's not what we were logging. We were logging. Uh, there's, I guess you can have potentially more than one issue, like in terms of like, let's say like if I were to do, if I made this like, if I made this a number, I would probably end up with two issues then, and it would be each one. Is that the, is
Yes,
that,
then you will have you can remove it, the zero index,
okay.
and change, for example, the name to null or something invalid,
Okay.
and then clear the console on the right and then execute it. And then you see you get an array.
Okay.
And but your point, I know why you ask, because of the issue key inside of an issue.
Yeah.
And that's because there are curtain schemas that can produce nested issues. And
Okay.
that's the case when the issues can contradict each other. So,
Okay.
for example, um, if you create a union that can be a string or a number,
Mm-hmm.
but you put in the value null, then the one schema says it expected a number, but it derived null. And the other one says, I expect a string, but derived null.
Okay.
And if you would not return them as a separate, as a nested issue, then
Yeah.
you end up with error messages that makes no sense because the one says I want a number, the other says a string. And
Okay.
whenever this happens, then it's we put that as a nested issue,
Okay.
as nested issues, and put out an error message that hopefully makes sense in this case. So you
Okay.
don't end up with stupid results. And what's also cool about Valibot here, Valibot tracks if data is typed. So if Valibot detects inside of a union that
Mm-hmm.
the type only matches to one union option, then we know you probably um, want this schema and did a mistake in this um, in for this schema, and then we only return you the issue that makes most sense for you. Yeah, we can have maybe also there's a lot details into Walid, but maybe we can have a look later. But if not, it's also
Okay.
not too important. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind
No,
of the
this is
reason.
okay.
Yeah.
The thing I like about this so far is it's very intuitive. Like I know we're walking through it because it's a live stream, but I find like this is like very easy to like to grok. Like I can understand like what we did on the left really easily. You know, like uh well, I mean, I guess if you're not familiar with TypeScript, the infer might throw somebody off, but like just this whole part, like the just saying, okay, this is an object and then this is a string and number, and I know there can be complex types. Like I imagine we could obviously have, like address, and then that could be another v dot object, and then it gets nested or
Yeah.
like or so on. But but again, to my point, it's like this seems it seems pretty straightforward based on the choices you made in the API, like object, string, number. So it
Yeah.
sometimes a library, you look at it and you're like, how do I use this, so
Yeah, so if you are coming from SOT, the most simple schemas look basically the same. And as I said, the naming is strongly oriented on TypeScript and JavaScript, like on the names these languages are using. And that's why it's probably very easy. And in case you don't know a name, you can just type v dot and then, for example, try out what it could be. And then you get a recommendation and you
okay,
can see if you can find it.
okay,
And that's why once you understand how to use Valibot, and especially once you understood the mental model, maybe we can talk about it later,
mm-hmm.
it gets probably pretty easy to use. It's,
Yeah,
of course, for more complex schemas, maybe at the beginning, a bit more complicated compared to SOT because you don't have the chaining.
okay,
Because of the chaining kind of TypeScript or VS Code only recommends you what you really can use. With
yeah,
Valibot, you have to know what you can use. That's why it's
mm-hmm.
important for Valibot to understand the mental model. There's a dedicated guide in our documentation talking about that.
Okay, and
And yeah, maybe we have a look at that later. Let's maybe show some more magic because I think there are
yeah,
some cool things people will be surprised.
yeah,
So let's have a look at something else. Scroll down to
okay,
the catch block and type the arrow now back to unknown.
okay,
And now next add an if statement inside the catch block. And
okay.
then use v dot is, no, v dot.
Oh, v dot, sorry.
Yeah. And then is vali arrow.
Okay,
And then you can pass a generic, and the generic is a type of profile schema.
okay, I'll use the type we created since we have it there.
That does not work because we need a type of the schema, and the type we created is the output type.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay, and
and
then
now we have to call is valid arrow and pass the arrow.
okay,
So you pass e. And what's cool now, for example, access again the first issue with the 0 index.
okay.
And now press dot after it. And now you can
Oh, okay,
already see what properties could be available. And there's more
okay,
magic. For example, select now, let's see, select, for example, expected.
okay.
And now hover it.
Oh, okay, so you get the okay, interesting. So you get a
So
unique
it's,
type.
yeah, it's fully type safe. So expected is a string that basically tells what type, in this case, was expected. And when you scroll to the top, we can see that we used an object schema, we used a string schema, and a number schema. And that's basically what you can see down there.
Okay. No, that's super cool.
Yeah, and that's maybe also a difference to other solutions because Valibot tries to be fully type safe until
Hmm.
the last written line.
Okay.
I will not say that we are 100% type safe, but of course it's the goal to get there. But
Yeah.
it's pretty type safe, and that at the end makes hopefully the developer experience better and prevents typos and smaller
Okay.
bugs.
Yeah, and this is nice too. The just having a very rich error because, like, for example, like we use at open source, we use Sentry, so we could actually send like this very rich error, as opposed to just like a, you know, a valley error thrown, or just a generic error. So this is like it's more helpful, I think, because it's one thing, when you're compiling your code and you're using the TypeScript, but like when it happens in the wild, like you said, uh, things are always unknown because you can never trust user inputs. So it's this is a great way to just kind of, okay, this exploded in production. Let's go see what the valley error was in our dashboard. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Um, what could we do next? Yeah. Let's make our schema more powerful.
Okay, let's do it.
For example, let's start with some simple things.
Okay.
Let's expand the validation for name and age. So in most cases, you, for example, want to save your name in a database. And for example, you used a varchar with a limited amount of characters.
Okay.
And of course, you probably don't want to derive an empty string. And we can validate that now.
Okay.
And that's now where the pipe method comes into play.
Okay.
And that's the method we just added with kind of the last big release.
Okay.
And the pipe method basically allows you to add additional validation and transformation rules to a schema.
Okay.
So it's we call this part of the library method. So the pipe is a method, and
Okay.
there are many more schema methods. And what you can remember is when you use a schema method, you always pass the schema as the first argument,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and then you
Okay.
can continue with other arguments. That's why v.string is here the first argument. No, v.string is already the schema.
Oh, okay. Sorry, sorry. Okay.
Because
I thought you
so
meant like
basically
just.
pipe modifies your schema. So pipe is now modifying the string schema. And now we can continue and adding more validation rules. For example, we can say v.trim.
Yeah.
This way we trim the string. And now we can say v.nonempty.
Okay.
And now we also can say, for example, max length. And for example, let's say 30 characters.
Just like that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and then you close the pipe, and
Okay. And
now we are done.
okay.
And yeah, maybe let's scroll down to the log statement and log the entire issues again, or the first issue.
Okay. Yeah, we can log all of them. It's okay. We can do just console. I'll leave it
Yeah, you
here.
can also use the log statement we already have there.
Yeah.
Wait, scroll down and remove the expected.
Yeah.
Yeah, then we are good. And now you can scroll up again. Ah, yeah. Now, of course, we need. So now, when you execute it, we of course get. Maybe let's change the age to a number again,
Okay.
and now execute the schema. Now we of course get an error because null is not a string.
Yeah.
So we can change that now back to an empty string, for example.
Okay.
And if
Which is
you
okay.
yeah clean the
Oh, okay.
console first, yeah, and now we get another error. We can
Okay.
see that's an invalid length. And there you can now see the language neutral strings. So instead of not null, it says kind of how we use TypeScript or JavaScript to
Okay.
say that something is not null. And this is also reflected in the error message.
Okay. Yeah. Expected, but received 0. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now you could add, for example, empty some blank spaces
Yeah.
and
To trim
then
it.
log. Yeah. And now we can see how trim works. So we can see the same arrow because trim was applied before the
Okay.
non-empty check. And the pipe actions, they are executed in sequence.
Okay.
So what happens here is that the pipe first executes the string schema, and then it passes its output to the trim action, and then it passes the output to the non-empty action, and so on.
Okay.
And
And
what we can, yeah,
I just had a question. So we're obviously piping it here. The initial type in the schema was a string, but let's just say that I'm maybe just not thinking too clearly, and I take this out and I come here. Okay, it does give an error. Okay, that I was gonna ask it
yeah.
because it doesn't know that it's a string. Okay, okay,
Yeah,
cool.
so as I said, we try to be fully type safe. That means whenever you make something wrong that it's not intended, then you
Yeah.
get a TypeScript error.
Okay. No, that's
So
good.
it's basically hopefully not possible to make too many stupid bugs.
Okay.
Yeah, too many stupid mistakes. And what's also cool, um, when you create a pipe with we string,
Okay.
even the actions after it are fully typed. For example, there are actions that only work for certain data types. For example,
Okay.
we have an action called I don't know how to spell it, mem type. So that's how you can like validate. Let's go with size. So
Okay.
we have action called v dot, for example, min size,
Okay.
and that's used to validate the size of a file, for example, or the size of a set or a map.
Okay.
And now you have to enter a number similar to max length, and you can
Okay.
see that we have a TypeScript error because
Okay.
the API is fully type safe and tells you min size cannot be used to validate a string.
Okay, yeah. And I'm assuming there's probably a min length. Yeah. So that could work. And then like if I come here and I do nick, which is should fail if I run that. Okay, yeah. So min length. And then here's the language again saying it needs to be
Yeah.
greater than equal to 5. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and what's also cool, let's remove the min length again
Yeah.
and hover over the max length.
Yeah.
So what's cool to see here, max length can not only be used to validate strings, it can also be used to validate, for example, the length of an array. But
Oh,
what
okay.
you can see is, through the pipe function, it automatically infers the correct type. So we can see
Okay.
max length has an input of string,
Okay.
and that's
Yeah.
automatically inferred.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's, I think, pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it is cool.
So, yeah. So based
Um
on the string schema at the beginning, it knows what type
okay.
um,
And
it has.
speaking of arrays, so like let's just say I went to I don't know pets and I did v dot array, and then I would just type it like this, or it could be anything, or is
No,
that how you?
you can remove the generic. You don't need it because it gets automatically inferred, and you can
Okay,
just add, for example, v.string as the parameter of as the first parameter of v.array.
okay,
So that's basically a kind of how you write it when you use the array type in TypeScript. I don't.
okay.
So TypeScript, beside like the brackets, there's also an array type, and you
Yeah,
kind
because
of
it's a generic. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So the API is pretty close to TypeScript, just kind of written with JavaScript
Okay.
syntax.
So
And yeah,
let's just like let's say like I wanted to pipe some stuff here. So I've got v dot array, it's a string, and then I could do the v dot um, max length, like you said, not max bytes. And then I could say, I don't know, you're only allowed 10 pets. So
Yeah.
that works. Um, but let's say, um, so in this case, like we know like the particular like items in the array, they're all strings. But say I wanted to validate that the strings in the array, like I wanted to do the same thing as I wanted to trim them non-empty. Would I have to? Is there a specific v dot syntax for array item, or how would that look like?
So you basically can also pipe the item of an array.
Oh,
So
right there.
you just wrap the string
Okay.
into a pipe.
Okay,
And
that's super smart.
in case you use the entire same, um, so in case you use the complete same validation, you can just create another schema above our profile schema that
Okay.
calls like name
Okay. Okay.
schema, and then you pass the yeah, and then you
Okay.
can replace the usage inside of our
Okay.
object schema.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then
also remove the pipe. We don't need it
oh yeah,
anymore.
sorry. Yeah, you're right. And
So
this
here we only say the schema, and
okay.
here we say you have to write the array. You still have to
Oh
write the
yeah, yeah,
array,
sorry.
but you pass.
Yeah, there we
Yeah,
go. And then just
and then
copy
you need to
that.
add the pipe at the beginning again because of the max length.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. This is
but yeah,
this
that's a
is
cool
powerful.
example.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
This is
it
super
shows
powerful.
you how you can reuse schemas, and schemas are completely independent. And
Yeah.
that's why you can nest them and you can also extend them and so on. For example, what we could do, um, add a new line
Okay.
and now create a new schema that calls extended name schema.
Okay.
And what we can use and what we can do, we can right now v.pipe and add the name schema as the first argument, and
Okay.
then add other
Uh,
validation
oh, okay.
actions.
And so here, like if we do v dot pipe, and then I'll
You could,
do
for example, make no write v dot, for example, includes
okay.
or ends with something like that, and
Okay.
then you
And
can say it has to include foo or something
yeah.
like that, or a specific symbol.
Okay.
So
Oh,
that
this is
example
really cool.
basically shows you how you can extend a schema and add
Okay.
additional validation logic to it.
Okay. I know we're doing kind of like a funny, silly example here, like pets and stuff, but this
Yeah.
is really super powerful because you can like you said, just being able to compose these schemas and then just sharing them. That this is like super powerful.
Yeah, so basically, people could create like a schema library on top of Valibot that exports like basic schemas, like an email schema and so
Okay.
on. Um, so that you can kind of pick it up and maybe make a Gmail schema out of it and so on. So you can start
Okay.
with really simple schemas and make it more complex as you need it. But
Okay.
yeah, basically everyone can decide how they wanna write their schema.
Yeah.
So there's no like official recommendation to go this way.
Okay.
The instantiation or like the creation of a schema is really kind of cheap. So it's
Yeah.
really fast
Yeah.
because we don't collect any validation logic while creating them.
Yeah.
And that's why it doesn't matter too much in terms of performance if you reuse them
Okay.
or just call them multiple times.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And this is honestly just so much nicer than saying, like if this dot property is not empty and so on. Like even if you had like good logic for your validation, the fact that you can't really pipe that logic to validate it like out of the box, you know, like with not with Valibot, but I mean like if I were just doing this in plain JavaScript, you know, it would be a lot of boilerplate code. So
Yeah.
this is really impressive. I think it was definitely a very good move to add the pipe to your API.
Yeah, so the change we introduced with the pipe is on one side that our API became more modular. That basically means if you don't need the pipe, um, you have a smaller bundle size. Previously, the pipe was part of the last optional argument of a schema. That means
Mhm.
any schema had to include the pipe logic.
Yeah,
And with this change, you only basically the pipe now only lands in your bundle if you actually use it. So that's one
yeah,
benefit. Another
yeah.
benefit is that previously um, the pipelines only allowed transformations that did not change the output type.
Okay,
And this resulted in a few methods that allowed you to change the output type. But that
okay,
also meant that you needed to nest functions and functions and functions to apply multiple transformations.
okay, okay. I
And
see.
this APA went out pretty confusing for more complex schemas. And so another big change for the pipe method is that you are now completely free on what you're doing. You can
Hmm.
change the output type, you can transform your data, and we can also have a look at that. So
Okay,
maybe remove the extended schema again, as we don't
okay,
need it. And let's add a pipe to our object. So
okay,
wrap our entire object inside the pipe method.
okay.
No, inside the entire object. So you start before.
Oh, okay. Sorry, the pipe
Yeah.
here, you mean?
So the object schema is now the first argument, and that's the schema we want to modify. And
Okay,
what we can do now, we can call now v.transform, and you can now pass a function, and this function um, has an argument, and that's basically our data. So you can basically now, no, you don't have to, it's fully typed already.
all right, nice. The
So
less types I have to write, the better.
what you can do now, return an object. So um, yeah, write, no, don't write return. We can make that smaller. Just
Okay,
create, return an object here and then spread in our data.
okay,
And now we can just simply add another key, for example, created at or
okay,
timestamp, something like that.
okay.
And now you can call, for example, new date.
Oh, okay.
And I'm sorry, there's no prettier yet or no formatter in our playground. I think I
Don't worry
will
about
add
it.
it one day because now it got a little bit confusing.
I'll
Um,
make it pretty. I'll make it pretty for people. Uh, but yeah, so you're saying okay. So now we've added this new property, created at.
is is there a prettier playground?
I could probably just copy it into my VS Code. You
Yeah,
could
maybe
probably.
let's do this because otherwise it gets really hard to follow for our
Okay.
viewers.
Cool. Yeah, no problem. Do you want me to just like open a small? Well, we can just do here. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. Hold on a sec. I lost you. VS Code. New.
Yeah, otherwise there's also a prettier playground where you can paste it in, and
Okay.
it's basically the same as our playground, but for formatting.
Okay. Cool.
I think if you paste it there, it will format it for. Does it work?
Oh, I got a syntax error. Data unknown. Uh, expected Oh, there's a syntax error.
Maybe
One
there
sec.
is one
Oh yeah,
bracket
there's
too much.
the bracket. Oh, I forgot to. Oh yeah. No, there's one there. That's the function. Then close it and then close it. And that should be okay. Oh no, I don't know what it's saying here. Let me
What?
open it up in.
Yeah.
I can.
Or
I'll open up
otherwise,
in Visio.
you could also share your playground with
Okay,
me,
yeah.
and I can format it and share it again with you. For that, you have to click the share button again.
Okay.
Yeah.
There. Okay. I'll just grab the
And now
URL.
kind of our code is embedded into the URL.
Okay. I'll drop it over to you. The where we have our session. I'm gonna just paste in the URL. You should see a message pop up.
Hmm.
Just yeah, and that should open the playground. I'm just trying to see. I'm just reading through it. So one, two. Okay, there. Okay, so we're piping. What did I do wrong? Beat up pipe. Oh, I don't need a pipe here. I think that's why.
Okay,
There.
something is wrong with the link because I can't
Okay.
see
I
any
think if
code.
you, I'll drop it to you on Twitter.
Okay.
Here. I'm not sure why it's not loading up over there, but okay, just one sec. Da-da-da. All right, there you go. You should get a DM for it. I see the playground loaded, so
Yes, now it works. So I will drop back formatted link. Yeah, we should really add a format. I didn't add it because I think it blew up the bundle size, but maybe I
okay.
should have a look at like some new formatters, or maybe you can format it on the server side.
Yeah, there's
So now you have the formatted version.
okay, so if I just reload. Okay, so I don't know what I did wrong there, but
No,
okay, so we've got
can you open the link I sent you on Twitter?
oh yeah, sorry.
And that's the formatted version.
Oops, there. There we go.
It's
Okay,
perfect.
so
And now
I
you can
clearly
also
had too many.
see, yeah, now it was all right. I could format it just by, I don't know why the prettier playground messed
Okay.
it up. So now you can see that the truth the pipe method, it's also really readable. So you have now the pipe, and then you have your object schema as the first argument, and
Hmm.
then you have your transformation. And the transformation, when you hover the data, it it knows what's in there, so it's fully typed,
Yeah.
and you can now we spread it now the data into a new object and added a new key.
Yeah.
And if you now have the profile schema type in line 16,
Oh, sorry. Okay,
it
we've got the.
reflects the transformed data. And what we could do now, we can change the type to a profile input and profile output. So let's change that to profile output, rename it.
Okay, the schema here.
Yeah, to profile output.
Yeah.
And now duplicate it and
Okay.
also create a profile input and change also the infer output to infer input.
Okay.
And now you can hover it, and then you can see that the input reflects just
Oh,
our
okay.
input, what we what we expect kind of for the input, and
Oh,
the
okay.
output reflects the transformed data. And
Okay.
this can be really powerful and useful, for example, in combination with forms.
Okay, so I guess like obviously like once this gets inserted into a database or where however you're persisting, you would add the created at. So like we get the data coming in here in the profile schema. So the data is the input, which should be the profile input. Um, but um, I guess so. Could I do this? I could say like const. Yeah. I guess how would I mean, I know how to add a created app
Yeah.
property to an object, but how would that look with like the validation? So would I just do this and then spread here, like and and then add a created app? Would that work or?
No, the schema adds the created ad for you.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the
Okay.
idea, the idea why this is cool and this is pretty cool is, um, for example, for people that know TRCP, did I
TRPC. Yeah.
pronounce it right? Yeah. So with this library, you have a contract between the front end and the back end,
Yeah.
and you the contract says that you expect a specific input type,
Okay.
but the schema returns a specific output type. So truth, because you can infer the input type and the output type, you can use the input type to create
Okay.
the contract between your backend and front end. For example, with a library like TRCP or with a form library,
Okay.
and but use the output type for the data you kind of expect
Okay.
as
That
the
you return.
result of the validation. And
Okay.
that's
That's super
why
cool.
this is really powerful. So in our example, because we work with unknown data and so on, it's not too interesting. But if you
Yeah.
have like a contract between, for example, the front end and back end, or between like the form input and the
Yeah.
output, this gets really powerful because in development you get TypeScript errors if you input wrong data.
Yeah. And this would tie in well with like something like TRPC, like you said, or code generation where you have APIs where like the API takes this particular input, but the payload returned is actually the infer output, like you're saying. That's
Yes.
yeah, no, that's super powerful. And I I think the thing I really like about this is, well, it's inferring it obviously. Like the I think the inference is the like superpower in here too, because I remember TypeScript in the early days where like we're talking like back in 2015, you literally had to explicitly type everything. And so now that TypeScript's so powerful with its inference, like this is great because like traditionally before any kind of inference you would have to literally write those two types, or you'd have to say this type and then the other type extends with the created at. So it's this is just really nice.
Yeah, yeah, and it for like pretty complex data, it gets pretty complex, and but with schemas, that still stays really readable and controllable. So you could also now nest the profile schema in another complex schema, and so on, and it still stays really readable and controllable this way.
Okay. Oh yeah, I just want to say hi. My coworker Becca's in the chat. Is my sound a little better now, Becca? Maybe I wasn't talking too close to my microphone, not sure. uh, there's It's weird. Something happened with, I don't know. I have my microphone up all the way, but
For me, the
oh, it's
sound
up.
is all right, so I can
Yeah,
hear you
it's
pretty clearly.
yeah, it's weird. I'm still trying to figure out what it is. Okay, she's saying it's still lower. I can probably adjust. I can bring down your volume
Maybe
a bit.
I'm too loud.
Well, but it's not that. It's supposed to equalize it, but I guess I'm gonna bring it down and see. Um, Okay, if you go ahead and say something, we'll see if we
Hello, hello,
sound
hello,
hello, hello, hello.
hello, hello,
Okay.
hello.
All right. Well, I brought your volume down a bit, but
Okay.
yeah, no, it's something I'm looking into, Becca. But thanks for mentioning it. Cool, cool, cool. Um, all right. What is somebody saying over here on YouTube? Let's see here. I think they had a question. One second. Uh, okay, it's Okay, they're saying the sound is just a little different. I mean, people can still hear me. It's just I'm lower than you. But okay. Um, anyways, that's something I've got to sort out. But yeah, so yeah, this is super powerful, and um, I know there's like a ton more we could dig into. I know we're over time here, so I can go for a bit longer if you'd like to, but I want to be respectful of your time as well. So
Yeah, so I'm available. So in
okay,
case, for example, there are people in chat that have questions, we
okay,
can have a look at that, or if you have a few more questions, and
yeah,
otherwise we can also come to an end. But
yeah,
I'm here, so I'm
okay, cool.
available.
Yeah, I think I just need to explore some more in here, but I'm I'm kind of blown away by the pipe, to be honest, and the fact that like you were saying here, the infer and output and infer input. I think those are like super powerful because like I think it's kind of funny like if you're in application land, typically you shouldn't be writing too many types. It's usually like library authors that write the bulk of the types because like a lot of the libraries, including Valibot nowadays, they just basically infer the types and give them to you. So I think that's one thing here. And it just reads so well. I find like the fact that I can just say, okay, like obviously you need to know a little bit about Valibot, but like
Yeah,
again, getting back to the primitives like the object, name, string, number, etc., and then the pipe unlocks so much stuff, and to what I was mentioning before, where I was confused, I was curious, like if it was smart enough to know if I did this, which it is. So like even like potential foot guns, because like if that wasn't written in, if you weren't using TypeScript, I don't think you would detect that. So
yeah.
those are just a lot of niceties about the library. Um, okay. Oh, she says the sounds about equal now, so that's good. So I think I'm just gonna leave my guest volume at what I just put it to, but I'm actually going to be live streaming with somebody in a couple weeks that's going to help me fix the sound. So there's that too. Um, cool. But yeah, I'll see if there's any other questions in the chat here. Just one
Maybe
second.
before that, there's one tip I can give anyone watching this stream,
Yeah, sure.
because I am of course aware that at the beginning it's really hard to know what APIs can I use and what
Yeah,
APIs can I combine with other APIs. And that's why, can you switch to the tab where you had the documentation open?
yeah.
Yeah,
Here.
that's why I can give you a tip how you can get along pretty quickly and
Okay.
easily.
So if
So
we
when
go.
you click the API reference on the top,
Oh yeah, sorry.
you can have here an overview, for example, an overview over any schema and an
Okay.
overview over any method. And
Okay.
also when you scroll down, an overview over any action.
Okay.
Oops, that was me. I'm sorry. and and now you can also use the search with Command K.
Okay.
And for
That's it.
example, enter string and
Okay,
select
this is great.
our, wait, select the first option, should be at the top. Yes.
Uh, there we go.
Yes. I think, yeah. Okay. Now now we have accessed the string API reference, and basically tells you the API. What's cool about our API reference, it's interactive. You can click on types, for example, on arrow message,
Okay.
and then
Here.
it shows you how the arrow message type looks. Yeah,
Okay.
let's go back. It was just like a little hint. And
Yeah, yeah, no.
what's
That's super
cool,
helpful.
what I was looking for when you go back now
Yeah.
and you scroll to the bottom. No, no, to go to the string ski
Oh,
API
sorry.
reference. Yeah, if you scroll now to the bottom, there are, for example, there are examples, and at the very end there are the related APIs.
Oh, okay.
So you can now see, for example, what kind of actions can you combine with string. when you scroll down
Okay.
more, a little bit more. Yeah,
Okay. So
now you can
it's
see all the actions. And the same works with array, for example, if you switch now with Command K to
okay.
the array API reference. Oh, it's the second entry because there's an array guide.
Okay.
Or the third entry.
That one?
One more to the top. Yeah, this one. Yeah.
Arrays async?
No, the next one.
That one.
Yeah,
Okay.
this one.
Yeah, okay.
And if you scroll down here, you can see that there are a lot less actions you can use.
Okay.
Scroll down more at the far bottom. Yeah.
Okay.
Now you can see you have like actions like empty or
Okay.
length or stuff like that to validate arrays. And this way you can easily find out what kind of actions can you use in the pipe with a specific schema.
Okay. No, this
And
is
now
super
we can
helpful.
have a look at questions if there are any.
Yeah, I'll see if there are any questions left. Bjorn says it certainly looks like a good tool. I will try it out and already shouted out the stream a while back, anyways. And he says makes sense to me for the validation middlewares as well. Support for the library by default. I think he's just saying he's looking to use Valibot. Yeah, in a middleware makes sense. Well, anywhere you need to validate it makes sense. Then Sahin is saying sorry, I came here a bit late, but I had a question about the type definition. I remember actually I came across the performance issues using type instead of interface because of TypeScript. Okay, that's not valid bot specific, but I, I'm still not sure if that's a myth or not. But you know, if you can make something in interface, just use interface. I typically use type whenever I have like unions or stuff. I don't know about you, Fabian.
Yeah, so in for modular forms, I used like types for everything because at some parts they are more powerful, but of course at some parts the interface are more powerful. That's why I also started to write any types with type for Valibot,
Okay.
but we changed some of them back to interface for a better performance and for some other benefits.
Yeah, I think it's like really large projects because I remember hearing about this a while ago. But yeah, no, that's good to know. And then yeah, Sahin was just saying the compiler got overwhelmed. I'm not sure if this has any impact on Valibot. Well, like you mentioned, you use interface wherever possible, so I think
Yeah,
that
and
answers that.
we and I think through our rewrite. So in one part, through our rewrite, our API got a lot more type safe.
Okay.
This of course will take the TypeScript language server more time. But on the other
Hmm.
side, I think we also improve the types so that they are hopefully more performant in general.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's all the questions for now. If anybody does have further questions, I'm gonna drop links to where you can reach Fabian,
I
and
have
uh, yeah, go ahead.
I have one last thing. We didn't show the bundle size and didn't show that
Oh
it's
yeah, yeah.
actually small. So what you
Okay,
could
let's do
do
that.
is you could open our playground again from Twitter, the Twitter link.
Okay. Oh yeah. Sorry, let me go to there.
Or we can also use this schema. That works too. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
So you can copy now line 1 to line 6
Okay.
and then open bundle. Wait, let me have a look. Open the website bundlejs.com.
Okay.
And
Let's
now
put it.
paste it in here and then click build. And maybe you
Okay.
have to zoom in a little bit so we can see it.
Yeah, 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 for sure.
So what we
Here.
can see now, this code costs you 1 kilobyte, inclusive your written schema, because that adds, of course, um,
Yeah.
additional code. If you would if you would remove the schema and only export the functions that are actually used from Valibot, it's
Yeah.
probably around like 800 kilobytes, something like that.
Okay.
So you could
All right.
change it to export and then remove the schema, and yeah,
Yeah.
import like or export the same things we
Okay.
used,
Okay.
and then change the import to export.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
Mm.
Uh,
And then when you click now
okay.
build,
Oh,
you
it's
can
building.
see the actual size that
Okay.
comes from Valibot. And what you can do now, you can click on output, and
Okay.
then you can see that
Okay.
it's actually pretty small. And what's even more cool, when you now go back to input and you, for example, add something like uh, null as an export,
Okay.
just add like another schema. You can use null or any other. It's with an underscore at the end
Okay.
because of the name conflict.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Reserved.
now we can see we have 993. And if you build it now, you can see it only adds like a few bytes. So in this
Okay.
case, I think it was like 9 bytes added by adding another schema.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Okay. So super
and
tiny.
that's also pretty powerful because the source code is somehow optimized for compression,
Okay.
and that's
I think there's
why, yeah.
there's I think when I'm not sure when Jay Larkey posted this on Twitter, but because there's no timestamps on the Twitter chat, but um okay, so you can compose into bigger objects. Okay, he's talking about TRPC there. He says, how can I convince my boss to switch from Zod? That's one question. And he also wants to shout out this particular thing, and he let me find this URL. Hopefully this is safe to post, Jay Larkey. We'll see in a second. Okay, so this is Typebox Workbench, and
Yeah,
it says,
it can transform TypeScript types to Valibot.
yeah, so
It's
which
pretty
allows you to
cool.
quickly generate Valibot schemas, like he was saying. So I'll drop
Yeah.
that in the chat for people if they're interested as well. And yeah, I think this is a good place to wrap up. This is like a super cool project, Fabian, and it's, I don't know. I'm definitely going to be looking into this because like we have some validation in our project, obviously, and this looks like a pretty a small bundle, like you were saying, and just very powerful as well. So I'll
Yeah.
just check.
And maybe for all of you that are a lot more interested into Walibot and also into the research behind it, you can maybe share my bachelor thesis.
Yeah,
And
if you want to drop that on Twitter, or where's the best place to find that?
yeah, I can send it to you. You can also open the documentation of Walibot because it's
Okay,
linked
yeah.
there.
Oh, okay, perfect. Let me go back to valibot.dev, just
Yeah,
in the
yeah, the
guides, or
guides.
okay.
And it's in the introduction, so you can see it here in
Oh,
the
okay.
yellow
Yeah, yeah.
marked section.
Okay, I'll drop that in the chat for folks if they're interested.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, no, it's been super cool, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to show me all this. It looks like a very compelling project, and I guess have you finished your masters now, or are you still in school?
I'm still at Pace University, New York,
Okay.
and I will finish my master's degree probably this December.
Oh, perfect. That's awesome. Yeah. Well, if you're ever in Montreal or near Montreal, that's where I live. So it's only like 8 hours away from New York City. So, or
Thank you.
if I make it to New York, I'll definitely drop you a message.
Yeah,
Um,
thanks.
cool,
Yeah,
cool.
I probably will travel a little bit after I graduate,
Okay.
so let's see.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, thanks again. And thanks everybody in the chat today. Lots of great questions. And if you'd mind just staying on for 1 second, Fabian, and
Yeah.
everybody else will. I think I might stream a bit of work after this. So I might be back on later, but if not, Monday. All right. Take care, everybody.